Hello everybody, my name is Michael Knipp, and this is a booktube channel where I normally talk about books. But you know another thing that people like books also like? Audiobooks. Let me just say right now, if you're one of those people that says, well, audiobooks are not reading, then you can just make like a tree and go away. But yeah, for a lot of people, audiobooks can be really useful because it's a way to read and experience the books that you like and the stories that you like without having to physically sit in front of the book and read the words themselves. You can do it while you're doing lots of other things. Recently, I've been hearing people talk about something called like dynamic audiobooks, or graphic audio makes graphic audiobooks, which is an audiobook where all of the characters have actors cast to play them, so they all have very actually unique voices, and then there's usually like music or a soundtrack. And you know what that reminded me of? Audio dramas. I guess back in the day, in like the olden, far, far away past, before televisions existed, people listened to audio dramas on the radio, and it was a cool way of getting an immersive storytelling experience without having the ability to put it in front of your eyes. You just put it into your brain as you heard the story being told. Kind of sounds like books. As a child who grew up listening to audio dramas all of the time, including going to sleep listening to audio dramas every single night, I have enjoyed audio dramas for the entirety of my remembered life. And as I grew up and found a lot of podcasts that I liked to listen to, at one point I had an epiphany and realized that I bet people make audio drama podcasts, and they do, and some of them are awesome. And I want to talk about my 5 favorite audio drama podcasts. If you are the type of people that likes to listen to audiobooks, or maybe you're the type of person that doesn't like audiobooks because they're not immersive enough for your style of living or what you like to do, you may love these also. So I'm going to talk about them, give a brief description, you know, the whole deal. The first audio drama that I'd like to talk about here today, I found probably subconsciously because my sister constantly talked about it. It's called The Black Tapes. The Black Tapes is about a podcast reporter who begins doing a study on a rich scientist who made it his job to disprove the supernatural. He made an offer that if somebody could present him a case that he could not prove using natural explanations, he would give them a cash reward. And so people submit videos and stories to him. He proves them wrong, and he doesn't have to pay his money. Well, this story follows this reporter's investigation into something known as the Black Tapes. The Black Tapes are videos and cases that the scientist in question here has not yet been able to solve. So he's kind of cheating the system because he hasn't been able to solve them yet. He hasn't given the people the money, of course, but he is convinced that over time he will be able to develop some kind of theory to how to solve these cases. So in essence, what we get is almost like a podcast version of, like, think of the X-Files, where they go around and they look at these supernatural cases and then they attempt to solve them. Sometimes the cases are a little creepy, sometimes they're less creepy. 100% of the time, the podcast has a just perfectly dusted coat of camp over the top in a way that is just lovely. One of the downsides of this being a podcast, however, instead of a book, is that it's something that's released over time. There are 3 seasons of the Black Tapes. It's not very long to listen to all of them. Unfortunately, the story has ended in a not super satisfying way where it is sitting right now. And the creators of the podcast have teased that there is more coming on now at least 3 instances I can think of, but no definitive conclusion has been given to the story. So while this doesn't wrap up in the most satisfying way, I still thought it was a blast to listen through and captivating the entire way through. And also, journey before destination, right? The second audio drama I want to talk about today is called Rabbits, and the caveats that I gave about the last one, about it not finishing up and not wrapping up and it kind of being an incomplete story in its conclusion, is not true at all about Rabbits. And if you are looking for an audio drama to try, in a lot of ways, Rabbits is the best place to start because it is 12 episodes. They are entirely contained. The story is finished, and it also wraps up in a way that is beautiful. I feel like sticking the landing for some of these audio dramas is the hardest part, and Rabbits' ending is just amazingly perfect. It's wonderful, and I love Rabbits a lot. So the story of Rabbits is about a girl whose best friend goes missing after she begins playing the augmented reality game called Rabbits, or I think there might be another name for the game. In the game, I don't remember, but it's about someone following someone who went missing after they started playing an augmented reality game. This story is like a science fiction thriller, I would say. And it has some very, very bold choices. The way that it's able to tell the story that it does, where this person is following around and they start getting involved in this augmented reality game, is very creative and well executed in the ways that it's able to pull off some of the larger and more insane story beats that it does. Additionally, if you're someone that likes video games, there's a lot of video game references, arcade game references, kind of throwbacks, a little bit of love for that community. But it is totally enjoyable by people who don't like video games as well. It's not really the central theme. This one is a little bit hard to talk about without spoiling a lot, so hopefully what I've said so far would encourage you to at least look into it. Now, let's talk about Tanis. Tanis is a little bit of a strange one because I feel like of all of the audio dramas that I've talked about so far, Tanis has the longest learning curve, if you want to call it that. It's the hardest to get into. I think there are currently 5 seasons of Tanis. It is a lot longer than all of the others, maybe than all of them combined. And it also has a little bit of a slow start with not a lot happening at all in the beginning. However, the payoff still happens within season 1, and to me, made it just instantly captivating. So the premise of Tanis, something that I forgot to mention, these first 3 audio dramas that I'm talking about are all kind of centrally connected in some way. There's a character whose name is Nick, and Nick exists in all 3 of these first podcasts. Technically, I don't know what's canon and what isn't, because there's no way that these 3 stories can exist at the same time in the same world for reasons you might discover as you listen. But there's a character named Nick that's involved in all of these storylines. And in Tanis, Nick is trying to uncover mysteries about this mythological place known as Tanis, which is given weight similar to something like Atlantis. Only Tanis is very ephemeral and it moves places around the globe. It doesn't always appear in the same place at the same time, but there is a lot of weird mysticism surrounding it. There's a crazy cult that worships it. The story goes places, as you might expect with 5 seasons of content. Sometimes it's a little slower, but it's always worth it in my opinion, especially if you've got some time to kill and you want to experience a little bit slower of a story. But man, some of those punches hit hard. Maybe because I have so much time invested into it, that's why I'm so high on the series, even though I feel like this one won't necessarily appeal with everyone's sensibilities. I still very much love it. Fourth, let's talk about Limetown. This one is not connected to the other 3, and this one has a little bit more hype surrounding it. You may have heard about it because it was turned into a Facebook Watch TV show. I do not recommend you watch the Facebook Watch TV show. The problem with bad adaptations is they often become super popular. People see them and they have the story beats ruined for them by the bad adaptation, and they can't re-experience them for the first time in the most poignant way. I had high hopes for the Limetown Facebook Watch adaptation. It had Jessica Biel in it. It seemed like it was going to be cool. I found it incredibly boring. On the flip side, Limetown right now exists as 2 seasons, 6 episodes each, of a genuinely creepy and at times horrifying psychological thriller, a little bit of horror thrown in, maybe that's the thriller element, story about a town called Limetown that existed in some semi-remote location, but it was a full town. It had a gate around it. There were hundreds of people that lived there, and it was a society that kind of existed on its own outside of the normal bounds of normal government. Nobody really went in or out except for standard import and export. And then one day, the cops show up, everything is burned, and all the people are gone. They've deserted the buildings in a rush, and nobody knows anything about the mystery of why those people were there, what they were doing, where they went. These people just went missing and nobody found them. Let's just say some crap went down and it was weird. The first 2 seasons of the show that exist have very different vibes. The first one is once again about a reporter who's investigating the mystery of Limetown. And the second season is a lot different, but I can't talk about it for spoilers. Nevertheless, it is still a wild ride with some disturbing philosophical and psychological thoughts. Last but not least, let's talk about a weird example of an audio drama that is very good, that probably doesn't have the marketing budget that it deserves. Marvel Studios, the same one, Marvel, you may have heard of them and their movies. They have a character called Wolverine from the X-Men. You may have heard about him in all of his movies. There's an audio drama for Wolverine that astoundingly doesn't seem to get that much marketing, and lots of people, including people in the superhero comic book circles, have never heard of. It's strange that this podcast exists. My brother, who's a big comic book person, he follows the comic book world, he loves comic books, he's dyslexic, and it's his favorite way to read stories. He didn't know this podcast existed until I told him. I only heard about it from an ad on one of the other audio dramas I was listening to. I don't remember which one it was, but this podcast seems severely undermarketed for something that is, using Wolverine as a protagonist and exists in a world where podcasts are blowing up. Nevertheless, Wolverine is about the character you would expect in the first season. Is a very standalone story, I think, and it's from the perspective of two detectives, kind of an X-Files vibe a little bit, where a massacre happens and these two detectives are sent to investigate the murders and try to figure out what's going on. The plot thickens as they're there, things get crazy, and Wolverine, is in the story too. One of the best things about this podcast, though, is that it can be enjoyed by people who have no idea what's going on in the superhero world or anything about the superheroes, really. My wife knows nothing about Wolverine at all because he's not been in the normal Marvel movies, the few examples of movies I ever watched. So she knows nothing about this, and she loved the first season of Wolverine. It is a very well done, well-crafted mystery story with some red herrings and some crazy plot reveals that involves Wolverine in what I think is a very good and accurate depiction of the superhero character, but without all the baggage that normally comes with having to understand anything about superheroes or their powers or what's going on. It somehow satisfies both the non-superhero fan, I think, as well as someone that does enjoy the X-Men. This podcast currently has 2 seasons. I've mostly talked about the first season because the second season, while I still did enjoy it, 1, wasn't as good, and 2, required a little bit more of the backstory of the X-Men to kind of understand. There was a lot more elements pulled in and references that you probably wouldn't even understand. I think parts of the story would be difficult to understand in the second season if you weren't familiar with X-Men. That being said, if that's not your cup of tea, that first season still stands alone and is still great. Now I'm going to go off on a little tiny bit of a side tangent. There just happens to be something that all of these audio dramas have in common that is something that I absolutely love and I'm a little bit of a sucker for, and I feel like I should give you some explanation. I don't know if there's an official genre definition for this, but the term that I use is a Pacific Northwest story. I'm not talking just about stories that take place in the Pacific Northwest. I'm thinking about a very specific emotional vibe that happens. Sometimes the story beats the same, sometimes they're not. A little bit of context. The first adult novel I ever read was called The Oath by Frank Peretti. I have not read the book since I was a kid, so I can't say what it's like to read as an adult, but what I can say is that it undeniably helped shape my taste for, in my opinion, what is the coolest setting for a story. Unbeknownst to me at the time, this type of genre did not begin with The Oath, of course. It kind of, in my opinion, and from the research that I've been able to do, started in the early 90s, maybe late 80s, with a television show called Twin Peaks. I'm not talking about Twin Peaks: The Return. I've never seen that. It seems like a very different thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the original, 2-series run of Twin Peaks. Mind you, I did not see this show until I was an adult, so I've had to kind of figure this out in hindsight, but it kind of seems like Twin Peaks, the television show, inspired all of my favorite stories, or a vast majority of them in large ways. You have a mysterious small town where a crime takes place, like a murder. You have an outside detective come in. Everybody in the town is seemingly polite, but there's some dark secrets hidden beneath the surface, and maybe, just maybe, some of that darkness manifests itself into some kind of evil force that is enveloping and ruining and also sometimes insulating the town. It may be a little bit abstract to explain, but frequently this type of story also happens to take place in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know if it's the mountains and the forests and the water, the beautiful climate contrasted with the insulated communities. I have no idea what makes it actually relate to the Pacific Northwest, but this setting for a story is my jam. And all 5 of those podcasts in some way contain elements of those, even if they don't all take place in the Pacific Northwest. Though, the first 3 ones that I talked about, the ones that were all connected, just happen to be called Pacific Northwest stories. They know what they're doing, they know their inspiration, and they nailed it. Literally, it's in the name. that's also where they take place. Even though, side note, they're very Canadian to people's accents and whatnot. Nevertheless, do you guys, this is like a little bit of a tangent. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Do you know what I mean by Pacific Northwest stories? Is that something you enjoy? Do you have a better definition of it, maybe? Have you seen Twin Peaks? Do you know what I'm talking about? That show is absolutely insane in some of the best ways. We could talk about Twin Peaks in the comments down below if you want to. But anyway, not to derail everything. These are audio dramas. You should check them out. Have you ever listened to an audio drama before? What are some audio dramas that you like that maybe I haven't heard of? Please, 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 if any of these sound interesting to you and you listen to them and you love them, let me know. Hit me up on Instagram or Twitter or down in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on these things. These are stories that I love, and I love hearing people get excited about them also. You audiobook readers out there, have you guys ever listened to an audio drama? I really think you should give it a shot. They're really cool. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already or you want to see more stuff from me. Please give this video a like if you like it. I hope you guys are all staying safe and sane. I love you all. Bye. Editing Michael also wants to throw in that if you are bored during this time of quarantine, go check out my Instagram. My profile name there is just Michael Knipp, spelled the same way as this channel. And every night I've just been doing a name this tune. I sit down at the piano and I play a tune and then you try to guess what it is. And I've been having a lot of fun with a bunch of different people sending in different guesses. Other people seem to enjoy it. I am enjoying it. If you want to join the fun, feel free to.